Good morning and welcome to the webinar on guidance and strategies for supporting the mental health of students with autism spectrum disorder and students with an intellectual disability. We are honored that Celeste Ryan, the coordinator of special programs and services at Coastline College, and her team accepted the invitation to present today. Before I officially introduce our presenters, please allow me to address a few logistical items. I am Will Francis, Project Director for Post-Secondary Education at the UCLA Tarjan Center. The Tarjan Center at UCLA is a federally designated Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities and your host for today's webinar. Support for today's webinar comes from the California Community College's Chancellor's Office through a contract that enables us to provide technical assistance and training to community colleges DSPS who are working to provide equitable supports, services, and opportunities for students with disabilities, including intellectual disability and autism. As part of our accountability for this work, we will be sending an evaluation to you, and we're asking that you would spend 2 to 4 minutes to complete that evaluation. Your participation is much appreciated. Today's webinar will provide guidance and strategies for supporting the mental health of students with autism spectrum disorder and students with an intellectual disability. A number of our colleagues are unable to attend today's webinar and have requested a recording of the proceedings. In order to facilitate access to a clean recording of the webinar, we have muted all calls. As we proceed through today's presentation, our presenters would love to respond to questions that arise from or that are related to the content of the presentation. Please take a look at the bottom of the Zoom program display where you will find a Q&A feature. We are asking that you insert your questions into the Q&A feature throughout the duration of the webinar. So to be clear, instead of placing questions in the chat, please use the Q&A feature. After each presenter, we will allow 2 to 3 minutes to respond to questions. At the end of all the presentations, we will respond to questions for an additional 10 to 15 minutes. To those of you who would benefit from closed captioning, that is available, as well as there's a link in the chat feature that takes you to stream text so that you could adjust the font sizes as needed. Thank you in advance for the questions that you will ask, and thank you for joining us today. And now I will provide some information about our presenters. Ivan Stoynovich earned a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology at UC Santa Cruz and a Master of Arts in Clinical Psychology from Pepperdine University. For the past decade, he has focused on being an ally to the disabled community. His experience ranges from serving as a behavior therapist at home and school. He served as a job developer and currently serves as an adjunct instructor at Coastline and at North Orange Continuing Education. Ivan also serves as a special project manager for identifying, developing, and implementing services for the disabled community, both in educational settings, that is, K-12 through adult education, and community settings. He has built and implemented several successful job preparation and job training programs. Welcome, Ivan. Katie Stubblefield lives, makes artworks, and teaches on Zoom from Long Beach, California. She received her BFA from Middle Tennessee State University, Murfreesboro, and an MFA from California State University, Long Beach in 2001. She's an adjunct professor teaching adults with ID and autism through Coastline College's Special Programs and Services Department. Ms. Stubblefield is currently the chair of the Career Options through Academic Support and Training, or COAST program, and is assisting in the development of a suite of certificated vocational programs, including horticulture, culinary, porter, animal care, guest services, drama, music, and art. In addition to teaching several enrichment art survey courses each semester, she is also the primary instructor for horticulture and porter courses of the COAST programs. Currently, Ms. Stubblefield's artworks are on display virtually as well as physically at the W. Keith and Janet Kellogg University Art Gallery in Pomona, St. Brocksville Woods, Into the Thicket, and Jennifer Gonlack and Hillary Norcliffe. Her pandemic projects include Durden and Ray's We Are Here, Here We Are, In Her Front Yard, Holdings on Consignment at Scape in Corona Del Mar, and the Grace Kennedy Gallery in Long Beach. Virtually, she is participating in How This Movement Looks at guidedbytheeye.com, an ongoing collaborative arts project through Schubach PR's Call and Response, a project in Los Angeles. Additionally, she has works prepared for the Pandemic Pause exhibition, Galactic Nature at Liz's Loft in Los Angeles. Katie's works have been included in exhibitions at Salt Fine Art, the Carolyn Campaign Clearfield Contemporary Art Museum, San Luis Obispo Museum of Art, Jordan Fay Contemporary, Jamie Brooks Fine Arts, Scape, Post Gallery, and the Brooklyn Art Library. Ms. Stubblefield has received both an Insight Award and an Individual Artist Fellowship in support of both her 2- and 3-dimensional works from the Long Beach Arts Council. Welcome, Katie. Allison Ferrier began her teaching career in elementary education, mainly kindergarten and first grade. The majority of her students were English language learners, and her passion was literacy. When her daughter was 5 years old, Allison took a leave of absence and had an in-home tutoring business. When she was ready to head back to the world of classroom teaching, a friend introduced her to the DSS program of the North Orange County Community College District, where she has been for 10 years. During the past 10 years, Allison has worked with another colleague on updating and revising curriculum. Currently, they are transitioning the curriculum to Career Development College Prep or CDCP certificates. 2 years ago, Allison was looking to expand her teaching in DSPS. She became the first instructor of the Animal Care Certificate Program in the Special Programs Services Department at Coastline College. Allison was just elected, woohoo, as the Special Programs and Services Community Intellectual Program Department Chair. She has created the master class for the Animal Care Certificate. She loves that her daughter, who is now 20 years old, is able to help with animal care ideas as she pursues her passion to become a veterinarian and is currently a UC Davis Animal Sciences major. And we cannot forget the Zoom support Allison gets from her fur babies, both dogs, Milo and Macklin. Ms. Ferrier continues to teach for both programs, synchronously at Coastline and asynchronously at North Orange. Welcome, Allison. Last but not least, Beth Syverson has taught music at Coastline College's Special Programs Department for 7 years and has stretched herself this year, revamping all her classes to teach them online. She grew up in Iowa and earned a Bachelor of Music from Drake University, then later a Master's in Music History from CSU Fullerton. In addition to her work at Coastline, Beth is a staff accompanist at Orange Coast College, plus she is the Director of Music Ministries at Orange Coast Unitarian Universalist Church and a leader in the Association of Unitarian Universalist Music Ministries. Ms. Syverson has taught private piano lessons for 30 years, and she currently focuses on teaching piano to students with intellectual disability and visual impairments. She utilizes audio editing software, online music games, and online notation programs daily in her work and enjoys using technology to create artistic connections. Welcome, Beth. Even Katie, Allison, and Beth, thank you for your willingness to share from the wealth of your knowledge with the California community colleges. And now, without further ado, here's our first presenter, Ivan Stoichkevich.
Okay, hi everyone. I just need to make sure everything is set up the way it needs to be. Can my fellow panelists let me know if they can see the screen okay? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. So thank you, Will, and thank you to the Tarjan Center for allowing us to speak with all of you today. I'm really excited and honored to be here to hopefully share some information that will be helpful to everyone. So my big thing teaching online has been how to keep things engaged, how to keep things contextualized to the audience that I have. And this is really no different. Right now, there's 111 participants in this webinar. And as a presenter, I don't get to see any of you. And that makes it a little bit difficult. So what I've done or try to focus in on is how to find ways to have everyone be included in what's being talked about and make the information be contextualized to the audience's needs. So with that comes a lot of polls. So I hope everyone's ready. I'm going to ask you to do something that I used to not tell my students to do, but I need you to please take out your phones. If you could, pretty please take out your phones and start a new text message. This next part can be a little bit confusing, so I'll try to go over it and hopefully it'll make sense. So what I would like to ask you to do is open up a brand new text message, and the phone number you're texting is 37607. So here, I'll do the same thing because internally I'm panicking it's not going to work. Once you have the number in, then you need to send a message that is right here. It says Ivan S 820, one word. It doesn't have to be capital. It's okay if it is. So just give it a little bit of time so everyone can do that. And what we're doing is we're entering into this poll system that exists outside of Zoom. One of the things that happens when you're doing a Zoom session like this one, you might not always be in control of the settings. You might not be always in control of making your own polls. So take a little bit more control into your hands by using this other software called Poll Everywhere, and it lets you do all kinds of different polls. If I'm going to move forward, and if you're not able to see these settings, or if you're panicking, it's okay. On the next pages, the same information will be available. So I'm going to get going. So a quick check-in. Can you please respond how you're feeling today? If you're feeling happy, just write in the letter A. If you're feeling overwhelmed, B. Upset, C. Or mischievous, D. And can my fellow panelists let me know if you're seeing the results? Good. One panic attack away. Good. Now that this part is working. Because sometimes this part can be a little bit tricky. So, okay, it looks like a lot of people are feeling happy. Some people are feeling overwhelmed. And I like doing this when I'm doing meetings and when I'm doing what's it called, my classes, because it allows for a free check-in to see where everyone's at. It's also a really nice reminder to remember that, hey, you might not be alone if you're having a bad day, or there are others who might be. So I know, at least for me, it adds just a little bit more patience in my typical interactions with people. So, oh, the other fun thing about this too, it's 100%, you can set it for it to be 100% anonymous. So let's get to the next one. What's your favorite pizza topping? And no judgment, at least, internally I'll judge depending on what you put in there. But overall, all works. So let's see. Somebody put tuna, I'll judge that maybe a little bit. But see, this is another cool feature that Zoom doesn't have within itself, is developing this word cloud. Now, you can have this for a lot of different topics. I have it about something silly right now, but it can be about, people's responses to your questions. Again, it allows the audience to feel a part of it. And it also gives this sense of community too, because right now, anyone who put in pepperoni and sees it a little bit larger knows that there's other people in the group who agree with them. So that's kind of cool too. Now, here's another one. Does anybody here speak any language other than English? Because I would like to show you a feature that exists in PowerPoint, which I'm using right now, that many people might not know. I'm not sure what language pepperoni is, but I would love to learn it because I love pepperonis. Okay, it looks like we have Spanish popping up, Arabic, Serbian. Mnogo mi je drago ako nisam jedini koji priča Serbian. sorry, that's me speaking Serbian. Sign language. Okay, cool. So it looks like Spanish is kind of popping up quite a bit. So let's see if this feature will work. Let me just go back one. And of course it's not, because it doesn't like me. 1 second. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna go back a little bit and come back to this screen. So if I go to this screen, what should be happening is that as I'm speaking, you're seeing in cap or subtitles below in Spanish. Now, I do not speak Spanish whatsoever. So I always say, if it's anything inappropriate on there, I didn't mean to say it. But where this is cool is in the sense when you're doing a presentation with a large group of people who speak a lot of different languages, it allows you to communicate in a language that they're familiar with. So the other awesome part of it is that it does cover a lot of different languages. Serbian is a language that I speak. It's me and 5 other people in Orange County who speak it, but PowerPoint actually has a really good translator internally for that language as well. Again, this does not replace captions. This does not replace any accommodations. It's just an additional tool that can be utilized depending on the audience that you're speaking to. Okay. Now, here are some of the Zoom things, or some of the things that I like to kind of focus on and show people, and I found that a lot of people don't necessarily know about. So I want to give it to you to kind of decide what direction we're going to go in next. If you want to learn how to use PowerPoint as a background, as a virtual background, I can show you that. We will only probably have time for 2 of these things. So I'll just give it a little bit more time. Okay, and usually what I do with polls is I start counting down so people know kind of when we're going to stop looking at these. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, wonderful. So the first one is how to use PowerPoint as a background. And I just realized that I have the wrong PowerPoint saved on the wrong computer, because in order for me to show you this, I actually have to do Inception. I have to jump in to my other computer that's next to me and to what's it called, share that screen, because unfortunately Zoom doesn't allow you to show what you're doing when it comes to the settings. So just one moment. Okay, so let me do that. I'm gonna have to stop sharing my screen, and then the polls I'll show afterwards. So just one moment. This takes a little bit of messing around with. Okay, so do you see my portrait over here? You do not. Okay, let me try one more time. There we go. Do you see it now? There we go. Okay, so Inception. Well, except it's blurry screen. But okay, so in this computer, I can show you all the different settings. When you press share, there's a feature up top that says advanced. When you click on that, you can click use PowerPoint as virtual background. So what I need to do now is share that. You have to find the PowerPoint that you want to use. So I'll pick this one. And it takes a minute to load, but here I am. I am now using PowerPoint as my virtual background. And this is extremely helpful if you have anybody who gets distracted easily, and it helps them really look at one place at a time. I've even had people who are signing be the ones that are sharing the screen so that they can do it right here while the audience is looking. The cool thing is you can change the size, which that's terrifying, but you can also move it around too. So if you have anything that's blocking the screen, you can do it that way. So let me switch back to this computer here. When it comes to the polls that I was using, it's the software called Poll Everywhere. And it's a wonderful software that is fairly easy to use. It's worth checking out the bugs and practicing, but I'll go over that in a little bit because I know I'm running out of time. So let me switch back to the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, can you all see that okay? Thank you for the thumbs ups. Okay, so another thing that I do in my meetings, and especially the classes that I teach, because I teach communication on the job, I teach a banking class, a clinical thinking class, and a Photoshop class, and it's all designed for students with disabilities. And some of them are asynchronous, some of them are synchronous. So something that I've always seen to be helpful in those classes, as well as in meetings, is to provide an agenda. So this is what we're going to be looking at in today's webinar. So before I jump in any further, what I do want to say is a sincere thank you. I don't know about the rest of you, but a little bit over a year ago, this was me when I found out we all had to go home. And to me, it's really important to kind of give this thanks because this was an opportunity for educators and for other employees to choose to shut down certain features, to choose to kind of go into a hole and figure things out and then be available to the population that they served. And I'm so thankful to all the educators that show up every single day and do what they do. I grew up in a country that faced war. And as a kid, one of the only stabilities I had was school. And when I lost that, it just was detrimental to me. So the fact that you all have showed up and continue to show up, and I know that adrenaline can last only so long, and now it's been over a year, but I want you to know that the students and the baby student of me really appreciates it. So let me jump into my tips real quick for when you're leading Zoom sessions. If you're reading a class or even a Zoom meeting, try to develop the rules together for that session. It allows for, again, that connection, that level of trust to be built right off the bat. Providing a clean background. Right now, it looks like I'm in my, what's it called, spare room. I'm not. I'm in a weird office with a lot of random things around me right now. But you as participants and students don't get distracted by the things that are going on. Using PowerPoint as a virtual background when you're able to remember there's lag. I always forget this one. There's always lag, especially if you're sharing a video or a show. So give it a few seconds before you wait for people to respond. Try not to ask your audience to have their cameras on. As a presenter, I love it. It kills me when people don't have it on, but people might not always be in a safe space to have their cameras on. So putting that expectation on them might make them feel a little bit less comfortable. As a presenter, you do want to have your camera on because, again, you want to allow for that connection. And then using annotation tools. Well, my light just went out. Using annotation tools allows you to point to specific areas on your slide, mark certain things, and help the audience look at things, especially if you're sharing a PowerPoint, an Excel sheet. It's a lot of information at once. So having that little laser pointer, unless you have a cat around, can be really, really helpful in showing the audience what you want them to look at. But my most important tip is be kind to yourself. It's been one heck of a year, and we see the light, but you can't give and give and give. Sometimes you have to take care of yourself, and that's okay. So I've shared crazy things, right? And I love this picture and I love this meme of fish in a bag of water in the ocean. It's like they're so close to accessing things, but they're kind of have a barrier. So I wanted to provide you some basic steps of where you can start. A lot of this might seem overwhelming. And you know what? It takes a lot of practice to be able for it to be quote unquote as smooth as possible. And I still kind of messed up a few things. That's an additional tip, especially if you're teaching. Be vulnerable. It's okay if you make mistakes. My colleagues know I make them all the time. So the most important tip is start small, but pick something. Build upon what you have. So, test out your PowerPoint as a Zoom before class. Try using one poll and see how it works. Do you know how to turn on transcribing in Zoom? Do you know how to reach out for help? So that's kind of it from my end. I did want to share, this is kind of what goes into being able to share multiple screens. So I'm a little bit crazy and that's okay. You don't have to go to this level. I just have fun doing it. So with that, I want to see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much for that, Ivan. Even while we are waiting for our questions to come through, there is a question in the chat that was asked that I think is a good one. Can we send directions on how to use PowerPoint as a background for Zoom, and how to use foreign language feature?
Yes, of course. I've made, I believe I actually even have a short video instruction how to do that. So would it be okay if I sent that to you and then you can send it out?
Most certainly. Thank you so much.
Sounds good.
All right, so we have a couple of questions. First one, how do you have your logo on your blurred background?
So that's a fun little trick. Basically what you need to do is you take a picture from your computer without you in it, and you can set a timer on your computer to do it. So you don't have to pull one of these under your desk of trying to hit the capture button. And then what you do is go to Canva, I upload that picture, I put the logo over it, I download it, and I just use that as my virtual background. So it's difficult because what I would wish I could do is just kind of slap that logo as an overlay and no matter what background I'm using, but you can't. But that way it allows me to pretend that right now I am in my room when I'm not. So it kind of also provides this level of, oh God, what's it? Consistency for your students too, to kind of know what to expect, what they're going to see versus being overstimulated by looking at your surroundings.
Maybe this one is similar, maybe not. How do you use a clean background in Zoom?
Okay, so if you update Zoom to the newest feature, the cleanest background that I found is just the blurred background. I have 4 pets in my house and I'm looking to get rid of all of them if anybody's interested. But they come in sometimes and I can't help it. So what I do is I just turn on the blurred background and well, are there any other questions or should I show how I do the blur?
Yeah, 2 additional ones. So let me read them.
Okay,
You can decide.
sounds good.
So what about those who can't go crazy? Dash dash, one school issued laptop. And then the final question, can different language translations be used in your presentation?
Okay, so for the first question, if you only have a single laptop, even using Zoom polls can be extremely helpful. At the beginning of my classes, usually I'll ask students, how are you feeling from 1 to 10? And it gives me a really nice finger on the pulse on what the day is looking like. So as you can imagine, when, we're in Orange County, when we went back a tier and we had lockdown again, the numbers were lower. So I know to focus on that, to be a little bit more dorky during that session as we're learning and kind of checking in. But even just using the polls within Zoom, it can be leaps and bounds away from not using them because, again, it gives the audience an opportunity to be a part of what you're doing versus just receiving it. And then, Will, what was the second question? I'm sorry.
Ooh, I'm so sorry. I just erased them because I assumed you covered them all.
What languages can be used in that?
Thank you.
A lot of them. The fact that Serbian is on there is, I mean, I wish I had a poll right now who's heard of Serbia before, because not too many people have. But it covers a lot of the major ones. And from what I could self-test, the translation is pretty good. The only backdrop to it is that it's one way, meaning that it's perfect for lecture style presentations. But so like if you have a tour of your services or if you're providing just like more of a monologue type situation, it's really, really helpful to be able to have it that way.
Yeah, and so beyond the what languages, more like a how-to would probably be good if we could share that with everyone as well. And
yeah, I should have that in a video. Let me write it down to make sure I double check.
thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you all.
That's it for your question. Thank you. So Katie, I believe you're up.
And Katie, you're muted.
Of course I'm muted. Am I still muted? Of course, you can hear me. Okay, good. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm very excited to talk today about some of the bells and whistles that I use on Zoom to keep my students engaged. I gave it a high title, Reimagining Zoom, Live Television Modeled Resources. But the truth is, I just pulled a bunch of ideas from TV, but I'll get into that. Let's see if I can get it to work. There we are. Okay. So I'm currently teaching my 3rd semester on Zoom for my homebound students with ID and autism. My practice is when I teach my art survey classes is to ask my students what they would like to focus on from semester to semester. Typically, students tell me what art practices they want to include, like ceramics, watercolors, installation, whatever. And I try and include those in my next semester's class program that I'm building. Last semester, I asked my students what they wanted to do this spring, and they said they wanted to travel. And obviously that's not a thing, but we figured out that we could do virtual travel. And so they gave me a dreamy list of all the places that they wanted to go. All over the US, Canada, Svalbard, which happens to be as close to the North Pole as you can get, turns out, Iceland, England, France, South Korea, and we rounded it off with Japan, which is next week. So I'm currently taking my art students on a virtual world tour. This slide that you're seeing right here is from our trip to Yosemite. Students use travel sketchbooks and colorful pencils to complete most of their assignments. We're studying the sublime in nature and color theory, which is a lot of fun. Students don't know that that's actually what we're doing, but they know we're traveling and having a really good time. As I plan for every semester, I ask myself, how am I going to engage my students this semester? And when we moved to the virtual classroom, the question turned into, how the heck am I going to teach my students art during a pandemic on whatever this Zoom thing is anyway? Well, I did find out what Zoom was last spring break. I'm very grateful to my college for all their support and training. As it turns out, when my students came back from break to meet me on Zoom, they forgave all my technical mistakes and they really stepped up. They worked through their technology issues and came to class ready to learn. It was really exciting to see them be successful on Zoom. We rooted for each other's successes. Last fall, our 2nd semester on Zoom, the students came back from their vacations well-versed in Zoom. They showed up with all kinds of fun backgrounds and filters, and so did I. The students stuck with me educationally, and it went really well. But by the end of the term, I could tell that Zoom fatigue was truly setting in. I was really concerned about how to engage them this spring, even on their preferred topics. I spent my winter break looking for ways to energize my students. I know my students love TV and they really love live TV. I decided I was going to think about Zoom as live TV. So I binge watched all the game shows, the competitions, the talk shows, and the cooking shows. And I started dropping all my favorite show tricks into the lesson plans. And that's what I'm rolling with this semester. So I'm here today to talk about some of the ideas I pulled from game shows. I'm going to pull one each from Family Feud, Jeopardy, Name That Tune, Let's Make a Deal, and Whose Line Is It Anyway? First off, Family Feud. I love the Feud's theme music. It's great. When you go into it, it gets you in a good mood. It sets the stage for everything in the game show. And I thought, you know, this is really cool. I could book in my classes with music and kind of set the stage for what we were doing in class. And I thought, well, when we go different places, I could do music from each different place. So for when we went to Barcelona, Spain, and this is in Barcelona, Spain, my screen share, we listened to flamenco music to come into class and leave class and actually throughout the class. So we get everybody in the mood. It was a lot of fun. Jeopardy has excellent countdown music. It's exciting and it's less stressful than a ticking clock. I have timed activities in my classes, and timing activities on Zoom for my students is horrible. It's stressful. It's no good. A musical substitute makes a world of difference for my students. So I replaced my timer with songs. For example, students have the length of a 3-ish minute long song to complete a warm-up exercise. This is one of those as an example. We were looking at Gaudi's Salamander, and a fabulous piece that's in a park in Barcelona, and they were supposed to draw a salamander, and they had 3 minutes to do it, which, no pressure, came out fabulous. I think it was pretty awesome. Love it. From time to time, the energy in my classroom just runs low. Our students only have so much energy that they can put forward to the classroom. And one of the ways that I try and get them amped up and back with me and encourage them to have more energy is to play a tune. I know it sounds kind of silly, but a quick game of name that tune can literally be better than a cup of coffee. So like 3 seconds into this song, they know it.
Here's the story of a lovely lady.
It's pretty fabulous. Oh no, it's gonna do it again, sorry. There, okay. Technology is wonderful. Let's Make a Deal has tons of great ideas that I've introduced into my classes, but I just want to talk about this one. They always start with the scavenger hunt. The show host encourages the audience members to produce odd items from their bags at the beginning of the show. So mouse pads, gum, cat food, I don't know, whatever it is that they want to try and showcase. And I decided I want to showcase, I want to have a weekly scavenger hunt. And I chose items significant to whatever the next week's lesson is. And I try and choose things that I'm pretty sure that the students have access to in their own homes. For example, Will, this is your cue. We're going to be looking at how light goes through stained glass windows in Gaudi's Sagrada Familia Basilica. So the scavenger hunt item was for everyone to wear sunglasses, of course. It was a relatable way to describe how the light filters through the translucent surfaces, and it gave everybody a chance to look cool on Zoom. It was a lot of fun. Finally, from Whose Line Is It Anyway, I'm taking back my classroom improvisation. In brick and mortar classrooms, pivoting to a new subject was a breeze, and it can be really meaningful to my students. Zoom classes are just not built that way. They have to be pretty highly scripted, and it's just the nature of the format. But as scripted as Zoom classes need to be, I've learned that sometimes it's better to throw out the entire script and let the course head in another direction, just like Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's not graceful. In fact, sometimes it's an absolute train wreck, but it's absolutely worth it. For example, we did a virtual tour of Iceland a couple weeks back. One of the things we discussed was a potential volcano that could erupt there, and it literally did, like the next week. And my students showed up to the next class telling me all about it. Our planned subject for the day was going to have to wait. We threw everything out. We definitely had to go back to Iceland and check it out. There was webcam, it was a whole thing. It was amazing, it was wonderful, and the students really learned a lot, and it meant a lot to them. It's still erupting, by the way. You can check it out on live webcams. It's cool. Beyond game shows, there's many TV models that I now go to for inspiration, or I see things I can use. Shows like Forged in Fire, Blown Away, and Project Runway all share their rubrics and have some kind of scoring system. My classes are non-credit, but I have students who want more of a challenge, so I share my rubric with those students to give them more chance to step it up. I've also learned so many technical skills from watching cooking shows. Oh my gosh, Cooking with Julia Child, America's Test Kitchen, and Good Eats have all been really great sources of inspiration. The technical visual effects, the sequential demo development, and the pre-taping tech are phenomenal. And using them helps to create a more person-centered class experience for my students. Finally, late night talk shows specifically are inspiration. I'm working very hard to perfect the art of the bad joke. All my students have mostly been sitting at home for a year. The novelty of Zoom has finally worn off. Any gaffes and ridiculous puns my aides and I can add to the class, no matter how bad they are appreciated by my students. Time will tell, but for now, my students are engaged. Zoom as live TV is working for them this term. Now, I know y'all thought I forgot Bob Ross. He's an incredible TV painter. If you don't know him, you need to know him. He's from the 70s. He's awesome. My students love Bob. They've all seen his videos and watched him on television, and we quote him all the time to inspire us in this format. This semester, his words are particularly appropriate. He says, "This is your world. Believe that you can do it, because you can do it. There are no limits here. Start out by believing here." Thank you, Will, for letting me talk a lot about this. Will, did I lose Will?
I'm here.
Hi,
You ready for questions?
I am.
Lovely, lovely. Okay, so we have two so far.
Okay.
The first is, where do you get the sound bites? And do you have copyright, if there's a copyright issue, or how's this covered for educational use, say? And then the second question is related, so if it's okay, I'll do the other one now. And
Okay.
do you have to get permission for using music related to copyright?
In my class, no, I don't. And I don't know why I don't, but I know that I don't have to if I'm just playing it in my classroom. The sound bites, I have a Spotify account of my own, so I'm actually paying for the music that I'm using for my classes. Maybe that's the answer to the question. The ones that I did here today, Beth actually set those up for me. I don't have that technology, but I just pull from my Spotify account and share during class. It's not like I'm publishing any of it, so I think it's okay. As an artist, we appropriate a lot of things for our art. So
This has another question. Do you need an art background to teach art? Such great stuff! Exclamation point.
thanks. I like to think that an art background enriches the experiences of the students. I think that there are many wonderful self-taught artists out there. I think that my students like that their experience parallels that of the mainstream students. I try and provide curriculum that reflects what they see, the students see around them in art classes that are more mainstream and credit related.
I love this question. For sensory different students, is there verbal description or script in alternate format?
That's an excellent question. I do have students who are blind in my class. I try and provide visual descriptions on the slide. I have a lot of art assistants working with my art students in their homes. And I have people who are like the designated translator with the person in real time. So that's kind of how I handle that live in my classroom.
Great, thank you. And thank you for all the wonderful questions. We love these questions.
Thank you. See if I can, I'm gonna unshare myself here, so. Thanks for letting us have an opportunity to do this, Will.
Of course. Celeste, it seems like you are responding to a question in the Q&A, is that right? You're muted.
That's correct. I thought that I would provide more information about special programs and services, or DSP&S faculty meeting minimum qualifications.
Lovely. I didn't want to take the question down. I'm taking them down as soon as we respond because I don't want a new one to pop up and I miss it. So thank you.
And let me unmute. Good morning, everyone. My name is Allison, and I thought it would be good to show pictures of my cohorts in at my home, my helpers sometimes. Milo, here he is. He's the old guy. And Macklin, who's what everybody's calling the COVID puppies. He's now 1 year old. So he's definitely lent himself to a lot of joy and craziness. Before I get started on instructional assistance support, I wanted to quickly touch base on the two types of teaching. Even and I have we were talking about it, the blessing and curse of both teaching synchronously and asynchronously. So at Coast, we teach synchronous. And for me, when we started, you know, the roller coaster, ups and downs, twists and turns, but it was the closest to in-person instruction. And I truly love that. And when you're teaching synchronously, that is the classroom instruction, and that the students are expected to be on Zoom in whatever capacity they can. And that's how attendance is taken. The big difference comes in when you add that A to the front of asynchronous. To me, that's the roller coaster with the loops, because there's a few more things you have to take into account. And I just wanted to be very clear that this is towards the most formal of distance education, and all attendance, all progress, grades, everything is counted from the learning platform that you're using. We use Canvas at both colleges. What I have found really interesting is that the students still call Zoom class, even though it's completely optional and they don't have to show up every week. But I would say 90 to 95% of our students show up, and they let us know when they're going to be absent, even though they don't need to. So it's very refreshing and just shows how much our students need the engagement and enjoy the engagement. And then one last little piece, in order to talk about things in Zoom, where it's our support, we make a lot of instructional videos. And if you want to talk about something in Zoom, it must be equal access in the learning platform, since that's where your accountability is. Did I get all that even? Excellent. Wanted to make sure we didn't have any misconceptions on that one. So at Coastline, synchronously, I teach the animal care, health concepts, and consumer skills. And for North Orange continuing education, asynchronously, I teach reading, social skills, and human sexuality. All right, so we've had so many amazing things shared with Ben and Katie, and soon coming from Beth. How does all of this magic happen? Well, our instructional assistants, they have been a vital part of our entire transition to online. So I'm going to go through 3 areas of support: our tech support, monitoring, and engagement. First, tech support. When it all began, they are definitely our superheroes sidekicks, definitely. And this portion, I'm specifically talking about synchronous teaching. So at Coast, when students needed to be on Zoom to be counted as participating in class, instructional assistants are vital in calling the students when we would wait, 5-6 minutes and then start calling students who hadn't made it on. And then one example is we have a student in a group home, well, many students in group homes, but this student in particular just wasn't quite able to manage her schedule, remember when class was, and also find the Zoom link and connect with us. And she had missed a couple classes. So what we ended up doing is working with the group home, and every week at the start of class, one of the instructional aides would automatically call the group home, and they so kindly helped her get on Zoom, and then she was able to connect and be a part of the class every single week. And then, of course, during the Zoom session, audio issues, visual issues, Zoom features. One thing that I have loved is being able to do a breakout room once students are familiar with clicking that join button, and then they can help them in a quiet environment to work out some of the issues that are going on, to make sure they can see everything and hear everything and understand how to use the Zoom features. And I think my favorite topic to talk about is monitoring, because I don't know about the rest of you, for some reason, I catch a lot of what's going on when we're in person. But when we're on the computer and I have 20 different little screens to watch, I can't seem to catch it all. And that's where another area where our instructional aids become just so important. Here's the Zoom world that we would like to be in. Everybody's sitting nice and attentive right in the center of the screen. Everything's beautiful, but we all know reality. We've got the pets joining us, which I, of course, love having the pets join us. We've watched puppies grow up in many households. We have the ones with no name on it, so we're trying to figure out who just joined us. And then we have the close-ups. We all really love the close-ups, right? And then a couple other stories I wish we were able to all share together, because I know there are a million funny stories out there. Just this week, we were logging on, the screens were popping on, and I hear one of the instructional aides say, student's name, "Can you put your shirt on, please?" So they are absolutely vital. Last semester, I had a student who logged on. He was still preparing for Zoom, and he was back from Zoom, and he was still getting dressed. So in that case, it was amazing that an instructional aide could quick turn off their video of that student to save their privacy and any embarrassment. One other feature that helps with all of this monitoring, if you're using the Zoom platform, I apologize, that's the one I'm familiar with. If you're using another platform, you could look into. I learned about co-host versus alternative host. So the co-host, you have to turn them on every time you have a Zoom session, which isn't that big of a deal. It just takes a second, but I inevitably forget here and there. If your instructional assistant has a Zoom account within the same account as your school, you can go into your meeting settings and you can add them as an alternative host. What's fabulous about this is they can also start a meeting if you had an emergency to take care of, and it just gives them a few more controls to help out during your Zoom session. And then, of course, access to mute all, video off, and controls in the breakout room. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention about monitoring. Another amazing thing preparing with your instructional aids ahead of time is kind of like a classroom discipline plan. One thing that I have found to be really effective is if a behavior issue comes up, and again, it's funny that it happens right in the week when you're going to be presenting. All of our students have different volumes that they speak. One student is particularly verbose and has a very strong voice, and it can kind of take over the Zoom when he starts talking. And then there are students who have those sensory issues that really bothers them. So one of the students yelled out and told him to shut up. And of course, that thing started to devolve at that second. So the aides were able to help with muting the class. I was able to quickly make a breakout room where I actually went into the breakout room with the students who were having the issue with each other. So thinking about the different controls ahead of time definitely helps with nipping any of those behavior issues or interactions that tend to upset the class. And then the instructional aides know that they can either continue with content, or I love it if they just start having social conversations with them, check in with them, ask how their weekend was, what do they have anything they want to share that they've been up to. And then the last piece that I wanted to talk about was engagement, backing up the things that we're doing. Even mentioned annotating while we're teaching, but I've also found it helpful that when the instructional aides jump in and annotate for me. For example, with our travel theme this year, I had a map displayed, and while I was talking about places, they would circle them on the map or put arrows to them and write names of places. And then another area that several of us use is giving the links ahead of time to our aides. If you're having trouble with bandwidth at home and with your Wi-Fi, you can ask your aides to run videos for you. And that can alleviate a lot of back and forth for you during instruction time also. And then lastly, a little tip on breakout rooms. I'm sure you guys have a million things you could also share. A couple of things that I love doing with breakout rooms. First, it can be random assignments where we're reinforcing content, but I also love to do leveled instruction so that we're all working on the same student learning outcome. For example, this year we're learning about budgeting and travel. So I have 3 travel groups, and they're finding it very interesting to find out what their parents spend on vacations. Going to Hawaii and Florida and Italy are our 3 groups. And so we share our content, and then the instructional aides each have a group. And what we decided to do is to switch each week. We use the Google Shared Drive for the information, and then we can get to know each group of students and travel together to all the places. And lastly, individual assessments. I've found this to be a great way to run a pre and post test, since it's more difficult in some cases with actually getting the paper and pencil or having the students complete it. So I'll have a script and preset questions, and then I can rotate the students through the breakout rooms with the instructional assistants, and then they just type the answers and send them back to me. I think that's it for now.
Great, thank you so much. There are 2 questions.
Okay.
The first is, I know there was a tip not to require cameras on.
Yes.
But do you find that if you ask for a camera check-in to see everyone, that helps build class and culture community?
So, yes and yes, but still being very sensitive. I think in the beginning, I have a student who has a different situation at home, and it just isn't fair to ask them to turn it on. I did in a breakout room once ask them to turn it on because it was a brand new student, and I just wanted to see what they looked like so I can put a face to the name. And yes, I would always love for every camera to be on, and I would love to be able to see all of you, but trying to be very sensitive to what's going on in their home environment.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Celeste is responding to the next question, but I will read it anyway because I want to add to the question actually. The question is, how many instructional aides in classes does your campus support? And what I'm adding to this is, how are they funded? Because maybe there are other collaborative ways that you are funding this. So there.
Okay, so I'll answer the first part, and then I would love for Celeste to jump in for the second part. At Coastline, we are so unbelievably lucky. We have 2 for all of our classes, 2 instructional aides. At North Orange Community or Continuing Ed, we have 1 instructional assistant per class.
So my goal is, this is Celeste, my goal is the ratio to be 8:1 in all classes. In some classes, because the ratio needs to be a little bit tighter, we might even be 6:1. But we find that our instructional associates are vital to doing the creative things that we want to do and to provide the support to our students. How do we support it? We pay for our aides through our DSP&S allocation.
Great, thank you. Maybe this is covered, but I don't want to skip over someone's question. You can nod if you think that we've covered this sufficiently. How can an instructional aid be provided for an individual, and are there resources that we can provide?
I guess I would need more clarification when you're asking about an individual. We don't, if a student is enrolled and they need one-on-one, then we welcome their coach in our class, whether it be in Zoom or when we're on campus face-to-face. So we would process them on campus as a volunteer so that they can be covered for liability reasons, and if anything should happen that they should trip or fall. But we do allow for outside coaches to be in our classroom to help out.
Great, and by coaches, I take it that you're meaning education coaches that may be funded by regional center or other community partners.
Exactly.
Great, and I know that I've seen questions recently about education coaches. We covered that about a year and 6 months ago, but we'll bring it back again because I think there's renewed interest in that kind of support for students with ID and autism. And then I think the final question, at least thus far for this, is my students with autism spectrum disorder are bothered by seeing faces that appear to be staring at them. So I have learned not to ask for the screen check.
Yes.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of, every class makeup I find is different, and I have to get to know those students and know sometimes I don't do a background because it's too distracting when they're trying to pay attention to me. Sometimes I need to do a spotlight so that there's less going on the screen. Absolutely.
If I can sneak in one more question, this one actually was placed in the chat. I'll do it here. Maybe even responded to it. Is that what the response is under it? Even, did you respond?
Yes.
Okay, lovely.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think it's my turn.
It
So,
is.
yay! I am going to share my screen. Does that look okay? Good. Hi, everyone, and thank you to Will and UCLA Targin Center so much for this opportunity. Coastline, my Coastline College colleagues have been having fun getting this prepared for you. I'm Beth Syverson, and I teach music classes in the Community ID program at Coastline. I teach instrumental, keyboard, and vocal music. And I flipped to teaching online a year ago. At first, I was pretty dubious that it would even work to teach our students online. But I had an adventurous spirit because I thought it was only going to be weeks. And my students have been extremely patient and hardworking, as I'm sure yours have been as well. Because it was such a quick change, I started off by using the same activities and games as I was using in the classroom in the before times. But it wasn't long before I realized that that wouldn't work. On Zoom, it's impossible to hear each other while singing or playing, at least if you want it to sound together. The time lag on Zoom lasts anywhere from 50 milliseconds all the way to 2 seconds, depending on each person's computer and Wi-Fi setup. And that is a huge variance. Just to demonstrate, I'm going to ask my colleagues on the panel to unmute themselves for just a moment, and we're going to sing the ABCs together. Ready? A,
A,
B,
B,
C,
C,
A,
D,
B,
D,
C,
E.
D,
H, I, J,
E,
K,
L,
L,
R, S,
M,
I,
T,
J,
R,
K,
S, T,
Y, and Z.
U,
So,
W, X, Y, and
And
Z.
Z. Sorry, I can't keep it together.
so as you can see, you may mute yourselves again. Thank you so much. As you can see, it's kind of a disaster to try to sing together. So music directors, choral instructors all over the world have struggled with this for this whole time of the pandemic. And it's been really sad. Any games, activities that I had previously done in the classroom that involved group singing, playing, rhythms, anything that needed to be synchronized was completely out. The only way I can hear students is if I listen to them one by one, which involves a lot of muting and unmuting and calling on people. So after a few weeks of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole back last April, I switched gears and started using technology as a tool instead of fighting against it. I want to share 4 things that I've done in the past year that have worked for our online music classes, and I hope some of these tips and tricks will be useful for you even if you teach a totally different subject. First is our online games. Once the quarantine hit, my music educator colleagues all over the world flooded forums with ideas for online teaching activities. I'm sure there are similar forums for each of your fields as well. You can look on Facebook, Reddit, podcasts, YouTube, all over the place. And I found a few games and online activities that we do every week in my class. And this is one of our favorite ones. It's called Songmaker. It's a free web app from Google Chrome Music Lab. And it helps, it enables you to compose a song by just clicking in these little boxes. And I'll demonstrate. This is a song my class last spring composed, and each person in the class contributed 3 notes. Pretty good, huh? So it's a really fun game, and I want to try something a little adventurous with you right now. I'm going to pass the remote control over to Will. I hope he's paying attention, and he should get a little notification, and if he starts clicking on his screen, it should work to let him, yep, that's him doing it, touching it. So now Will's gonna make us a little song. Excellent. Very good. Okay, here's how it sounds. Love it. All right. Very good. So that game, my students ask for it every single week. They don't get sick of it. And sometimes we build on it and make bigger projects, and sometimes it's just a one-off. If you just Google Songmaker in Google, it will show up, or Google Songmaker with Google Chrome. I'll put the link in chat at the break, or at the question and answers. And the remote control feature is really fun. It takes a little while for students to get used to it. It took a long time. The first couple of times for students to get used to the idea that they have to push the button and then they can control it. And on some people's computers, it doesn't work at all. But I found it's been really fun. And the students who it doesn't work for, I just ask them what color they would like, on the left or right, up, down, and then that works their communication skills anyway. So we're not doing traditional music education, but heck, we're learning highs and lows, chords, patterns, all sorts of music is happening, even though we're doing fun online games. Oops. All right. My next hack works around Zoom's limitations and creates a quick way to get yes and no answers from the class. I usually keep everyone muted, so when I ask a simple yes or no question, I have the students show me with big arms. So this is yes, arms over their head, and this is no. So my colleagues are going to help me with this. Do you like broccoli? Yes or no? Do you live in Huntington Beach? Good. Okay, so it's super easy. And it's big enough that it's very quick for the leader to see what's going on. I can also ask, do you want your break now or in 5 minutes? Or was that song high or low? Any two answer questions work for that little hack. All right. The third tip I have for you is to bring in guests to your online classes. One of the great things about Zoom, one of the few great things, is that geography is no longer a consideration. In the spring and fall semesters, I brought in a guest musician to almost every class for about 30 minutes. They talked about their musical journey, demonstrated their musical skills, and answered the students' questions. The most common questions were always, when did you start learning to sing or play? And do you have any pets? So we've seen pets from all over the place. I brought in friends and colleagues from all over the country. I brought in an opera singer, a jazz pianist, a tuba player, a harpsichordist who also happens to be a professional toy piano player, a singer-songwriter friend, and a Broadway singer, just to name a few. And she was on hiatus. Her show got totally canceled last April, and so she and the students could totally commiserate about not being able to sing together. So the students, the guests, and I all have a great time together. My students are getting an absolutely unique music education because of my guests. There's no way I could give them all of these up-close views into so many different aspects of music. After each guest performs, I have each student add a line to a thank you note. And after I send the thank you note to the guest, they always write back and thank me for having the opportunity to get to know our students. And since most of my colleagues have been out of work, musicians, during the last year, they were happy to have something to do. And incidentally, despite that, only one of my colleagues asked for a fee. The rest of them did it just for free. So I really encourage the guests, bringing guests into your class. And you know what? I'm going to keep doing it even when we go back to school. I can keep Zooming people from all over the world, even when I'm in the classroom. And lastly, we always do one big project each semester. Even in the before times, we would prepare for a big culminating concert. And on Zoom, instead of preparing for a live concert, we created a virtual choir thing. The Muppets were way ahead of us on this. So each student has to record themselves on their phones, listening to a guide track through headphones, so we would all have the same timing and pitch, sort of. I created an instructional video that walked them through each step so they could work on it throughout the week, but we also took half of every class for about 6 or 8 weeks to get everyone through all the steps. Sometimes it seems like a real slog and not much traditional music education was happening, but really, they're learning music production, recording, technology, collaboration, and plus the regular repertoire that they're learning for the performance. The end result last fall was a recording of a 1970s medley that they will be able to hold on to forever. And this is a clip from the video from our online concert last December.
Sing a song, make it simple to last your whole life long. Don't worry that it's not good enough for us to hear. Just sing a song.
Yay! I love them so much. So I hope you can find ways to make technology your friend for the duration of our online teaching time and even beyond when we go back into the classroom. I believe my students' music education has been totally enriched by technology with this online learning platform. They're learning different things sometimes than we typically learn in the classroom, but I think online learning is creating well-rounded and engaged musicians. And now we'd like to open it up for questions for me or any of us at this point. Thank you so much. And I'm going to put...
So the first question is, can you please send out the link for that game?
Okay, on it. As soon as I can find the chat again. Yes. There it is.
Someone said in the comment that the class song made me cry, that it was beautiful. You know, all of us have heard it several times, and I got chills sitting here too and tears in my eyes because it's so wonderful.
I had to think about football so I wouldn't cry and mess up the whole end of my presentation. That's my trick. Think about something you really hate, and then you don't cry.
Yay. So I'm waiting for other questions. And while we're waiting for other questions, I think this might be a very good time for us to launch a poll while we still have 98 individuals here. Feel free to drop additional questions into the Q&A. Other people are admitting that they cried. I'm not going to, no confessionals today. None, no.
Well, there was one question, I don't know, maybe one of the panelists had answered it that was in the Q&A, but I thought it would be a good time to maybe throw it out. Somebody had asked if, when we return to campus, if you imagine yourself continuing any of these Zoom tricks in the classroom.
Yes,
Katie?
absolutely. Absolutely. I would never have thought of this travel option being something that worked for me. I can interview artists and take my students to museums that are currently closed up. I can take them on tours anywhere to look at any kind of artwork. And I would not normally have done that before in the past. That is a huge, big deal. Yeah.
And I think for me, using Canvas was something that I wasn't really looking to push or just kind of have it there as a resource. But now the ability for the students to do their homework or look at the information online at their own time, it's been wonderful. In asynchronous and synchronously, I had a student Zoom in from Korea. They were in Korea at the beginning of the semester. How cool is that? And then I also get assignments that get turned in 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. and things like that, different schedules for different people.
Yeah, one of the latest comments in the chat is an individual said, yes, love that the boundaries are reduced with Zoom. We can travel far and wide and ask people to join us who are far from us. Enriching. Again, if you would be so kind as to complete the single question poll, we'd appreciate it. And if there are additional questions, please insert those into the Q&A.
One thing I wanted to add about the question of turning on the camera or asking your students or participants to do it, there's a lot of different ways to build up the sense of community and togetherness in a class. One of the things that I try to do too is when I'm doing attendance, for instance, I'll ask a question instead of just doing the simple yes, here, here, here. And the questions can be like, what's one achievement you're the most proud of? So that gives me huge insight in the level of self-esteem sometimes of students, what they take pride in. You kind of really look into those things and see, and it also gives an opportunity for them to hear about each other's successes and things like that. And I also, especially on my communications on the job class, sometimes students don't feel comfortable saying their answers out loud because of who's around them. Sometimes they Zoom in from work actually during work break. So then being able to type it out if they're able to is also a nice, safe, anonymous way of ensuring there's communication, ensuring that their voice is heard, and that they're still a part of the conversation.
I had another example happen this week. We've all been talking about traveling a bit. We adopted for our program this semester a travel theme. So as much as possible, we're integrating into whatever content we're teaching. And we're gearing up for an amazing showcase of the students, which Katie and Beth are the leaders of. And in my consumer skills class, as we've been making little short videos on Zoom, and then the whole video editing, another thing, we had to get the video releases from the students. And there were some that I was really surprised said, no, I don't want to be videoed. And their camera's always on Zoom. So we did brainstorm. I brainstormed with the instructional aides and we came up with another idea, and I offered it as no pressure. I just said, some of you, I think, want to participate, but you don't want your face and, you know, the video part of it done. I said, what if you turned your screen off and it was just your voice? So that's how I did a Zoom recording of a couple of students, and now it displays their name. And then I said, if you want me to put a picture, I can, but if not, so we redid their video release, and the two students were so excited that now they could participate without a live video. So sometimes we just got to brainstorm with others and to come up with some workarounds.
Great, thank you for that. We have one question. And then if I could point the participants' attention to the chat feature, we have inserted a link to a SurveyMonkey evaluation that will take you approximately 3 to 4 minutes to complete. We want to hear from you regarding topics like this one that you are interested in obtaining professional development for you and your staff. So if you could respond to that simply by clicking on the link, we'd appreciate it. If you have not yet participated in the single question satisfaction poll, that is still up. I see that we're at 84% participation so far. And here's the question. I see students with autism spectrum disorder who are in mainstream, meaning 4-credit classes. What can we do to provide support to help them build connection in that environment?
So I think it really depends on the student and how involved they want to be as well. So providing them different options is wonderful, but it's kind of taking a look at what the school has to offer as well. I know that both Coastline and NOCE have offered like social hour type events, and I know more and more programs are doing that. So just kind of letting them know to do it. And I also think it's kind of a cool opportunity now where there's potentially less social anxiety to jumping in on a Zoom, because I can turn off my camera and you don't have to see me, you know, or to interact with me, and I can just kind of hop in and hop out. So it really allows for baby steps towards whatever social engagement it might be, and an easy out if you don't feel comfortable staying there.
Great, thank you.
And panelists, there's a invitation to fill out an opportunity to do your presentation at KPED.
Yeah. Oh, here's another question.
Another opportunity to share, you guys. You're awesome.
Actually, we answered that one before. Okay, so while we're waiting for other questions, it's never too early to do this. Thank you, Evan, Katie, Allison, and Beth. And thank you, Celeste Ryan, for sharing from the wonderful work that you are doing with students with intellectual disabilities and autism at Coastline College. Thank you. This is wonderful. I wish we could do this again, and we're not done yet. So it's exciting, the work that you're doing, and I'm so glad that we could be a part of sharing this with our colleagues. Again, if there are additional questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A. There is no question that's a bad one, so please feel free to drop questions.
That's what I tell my students all the time. The only bad question is the one you don't ask.
The one that goes unasked, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And your timing was perfect. Look, we got through this wonderful
Yeah.
content and we have time for additional questions. So thank you, thank you. Again, if there are questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, the Q&A feature. And again, we've inserted the SurveyMonkey link so that a more extensive evaluation can be completed and you can provide ideas for topics for additional webinars. So presenters, is there anything that you wanted to say that you were not able to because you left it off the slides because you didn't feel we had enough time? No pressure.
I forgot to just reiterate, don't worry if you're not good enough for everyone else to hear. Just sing a song. Just do it.
It's a great summary for what this year has been. of just, you know, trying, failing, being comfortable with it. No matter the student population that you may teach or may work with, showing that side of vulnerability and just trying something new. There's been a lot of times where I've used third-party apps to try and increase engagement that have crashed and burned. And the students will tell me, and it's awesome because then again, it helps me kind of identify, okay, this works, this doesn't work, to kind of go from there. So don't be scared to experiment. This whole year has been like a forced experiment on us with a lot of amazing successes that who knows when we would have uncovered.
Yeah,
absolutely. You even made me think of a moment where just shows how amazing our students are and the grace and how much they care about each other. So during a Zoom session, I had a student who we have an ASL interpreter for. And when I went to admit the interpreter to the class, I clicked remove, and they can't get back in once you remove them. I was panicking and I said to the class, you guys, the only way we have to get the interpreter back in. The only way we can do this is if I shut down class, I shut down Zoom, and everyone has to connect again. They go for it, Allison, do it, just do it. So we did. And I emailed with the interpreter, apologizing a million times, but we all got back on and it worked. So our students are awesome.
One last thing I'll add is, I don't know about the rest of you, but my level of confidence of Zoom and online teaching working at the start of this was nowhere near to the actual results of it. And the lesson behind it that at least I took away from it is not to doubt our students. I mean, I feel kind of, it's difficult for me to verbalize these things because it's very vulnerable to kind of share that I did doubt. And look how amazingly they have done. And just what are some other things that we might be doing a similar thing to? So I know, at least for me, I always kind of go back to that March way of thinking and see, you know, if I stayed with that type of thinking, where we would have ended up, and it's not good. So remembering not to even accidentally set limits on our students.
Thank you to our audience participants for joining us today. Thank you to my able assistant, Christina Martinez, who works behind the scenes as my right hand logistically to make certain that everything that we need to do gets done. Thank you, Celeste, for sharing your wonderful team with us. This has been amazing.
They are an amazing group.
They are. Thank you so much for not being selfish with them. Thank you, Evan, Katie, Allison, and Beth, for sharing from the wealth of your knowledge and your heart with your colleagues today. We appreciate
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
it. Enjoy the rest of the week.